Okay, welcome back. So before I go on to my next video, I just want to show you that I've cleaned up propensity.php a little bit from what we had in the last video. So I mean, if we scroll down, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward structure anyway, but it was getting a little bit messy with too many comments and so forth. So I've just cleaned that up. I might actually come back a little bit later on and do maybe see if I can get it a little bit more sort of elegant than it currently is. The other thing that I've added, in the same way that I did to the import PHP file, I've also added some CSS, as you can see here, because I've added this to the tossed store menu as a menu option, and obviously there's going to be some output from that, so I just want that to be stylized in the same way as the last file. If I go into the home page, index.php, there you go. So you can see there we've got import new customers, and I've now added generate propensity index. Let's just run that. So this is our master propensity entity with our two keys, which we worked on in the last video. I'm just going to delete these. There you go. And now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to generate propensity index. There you go. So that shows us down here indexable accounts are 2. It shows us those 2 accounts, and the final index count, so those are the ones they actually inserted into the database, is also 2. So we know that worked well. Execution time 1 second. Okay, let's clear that. Let's double check it's there. Let's browse. Yep, and there they are back in the database. I mean, as I said in my last video, normally this is propensity.php is something that you'd put on something like a cron tab to run each day at a set time, but purely for the purposes of this, this particular exercise, I've just added them to the menu just for ease. Okay, so now let's move on to the next video. Okay, so welcome to video 3, personalize and publish the retail sales Ezine. So at this point we've created the back end of the store, including the sales ledger and including the product portfolios, including the master accounts entity, and including the propensity, the master propensity index entity. So we've really got everything in place that we need now to go on and actually create that personalized Ezine. So let's move on to the next big bit. So the next big component is the graphics. So for the Ezine, obviously as a fashion retailer, so it's going to be very heavily reliant upon graphics, upon photography. So what I've done, I've actually created all of the graphic content that we're going to get in there. So I'm just going to take you through this now. Okay, so here is all of the media that we're going to be using to actually make up the Ezine. Now I haven't created all of the photography, all of the photographic elements that we're going to need for every customized eventuality based on the propensity index. Purely for this exercise, obviously I know from the propensity keys that have been generated what we're going to try and cross-sell, what we're going to try and upsell. So I don't want to go through the whole process of creating a load of images for this that I'm not actually going to use for this exercise. So I've only created the elements that I'm going to actually need. But in theory, what you would actually need is for each category So that's men's fashion, men's footwear, men's sportswear, men's accessories, women's fashion, women's footwear, and on and on and on. You need to create a product chart essentially for each banding within each of those categories. That's a huge amount of images just for me to do for the exercise. So that's why I've limited to just the ones I know I'm going to be using. I'm just going to quickly take you through the images I've set up. So the first thing I've done is to create the aspirational images. So this is coming from the aspirational part of the propensity index. So if I go in here, so here we go. So these are the aspirational images that I've created for use in the Ezine for aspiration. Let me go back to media. We've also got boys fashions. Here we go. We've got 4 for boys fashions. We've got men's fashions here. 4 images for men's fashions. We've got 4 for men's footwear. 4 for men's sportswear. 4 for women's fashions. And we've also got the category here, which we haven't talked about, which is just for you. I'll come on and talk about that a little bit later as we go into the actual Ezine. All of these graphics here are also for use in the Ezine. So they're branding graphics and they're category graphics, such as this one here, which is for men's footwear. There you go. Okay, so these are all ready done. Now there was another component, there was another entity that we needed to create, because obviously we've got the graphics. We're going to include this inside an HTML Ezine, but these need to be clickable. You need to be able to click through to the correct product page for each of these images. And the Ezine needs to be able to work out from the propensity index how it actually goes and finds the actual pathway for these images, because they're not going to be embedded within the email itself. These are going to be sitting onside my server space, and they'll pull through into that email. Okay, so here we are in Dreamweaver, and this is the template structure of the Ezine. So as you can see here at the top, we've got the store banner with the main branding. Then as we go down, here we have holding places for 4 aspirational shots together with a spring into summer banner. This then is followed by the category sections. So we've got men's fashion, 4 images, men's footwear, 4 images, men's sportswear, 4 images, we've got boys fashion, and we've got women's fashion. Now I've only set this template up to, in this instance, just to show the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. I mean, obviously the actual dynamic email, the content will be generated based upon the propensity key, so it wouldn't just be limited to what you're seeing here. You would still get boys sportswear, boys footwear, boys accessories, the same for girls, the same for junior, all being driven by that propensity index. Okay, so if I now just go into the code, so this is the HTML that we have here. So what we now need to do for the PHP in order to generate dynamic content is to take all of these essential ingredients of that HTML format and turn it into a PHP variable, and then we'll be able to start to insert some PHP code in, which will allow us to drive that dynamic content. Okay, so this is a new PHP page, send newsletter.php, and this is the code that's actually going to generate that customized retail sales Ezine. One of the things I want to show you at the top, I've added a a PHP, it's a function that's actually supplied by Google, and it's called phpmailer.php. And what this function allows you to do is to kind of use your Gmail account as your mail server or your mail service, and this is what I'm going to use to actually send those ezines. If we just now come down here to this section, what I want to do is I want to select the account number and the propensity from the master prop entity, where epoch is greater than time minus 7,776,000 seconds. As you know, that's 90 days. And just to remind you, the master prop table is here. So this is where you have the propensity key is stored in this field. Okay. Once that is then selected, it's then going to loop through selected accounts. And while it's doing that loop, what it is doing, it's storing the account number into a variable array customer. It's storing the propensity field, which contains the propensity index, into another variable array, propensity. Then what it's doing, it's then going to select the first name, the email, the gender from the master account entity, where account number equals customer, in that same variable array that we established here. So it's going to essentially bring all this information in for all of the selected accounts that are going to be receiving that ezine. I'm just going to go back into the TOST database, and I'm just going to reacquaint us with the master account entity. Here's the table here. So this is the one where we've got the account number, the title, first name, other names, last name, email, date of birth, gender. We've got the address fields, we've got the county field, the postcode field, and the mailable field. So that's where it's going to pull that information from. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do now, before I carry on explaining this, I think I'm actually going to run that finished code, and I'm going to actually show you the ezine that we're going to generate, and then what I'll do is I'll try and reverse engineer that method for you, so you can see how we actually got to that point. Okay, so now we're in Gmail, and here is that email. The reason it's saying that it's actually sent by me is because essentially I've used that PHP mail function that Google supply. So essentially I've kind of sent it to myself. So I've sent it from this Gmail account to this Gmail account, just so that we can actually see it. So the subject is personalized. It's George, check out our new spring summer range. I'm just going to go into that, and here is the actual email. So this is all, or it's full of dynamically driven content. So we start off with the main brand in here. Then we've got a personalized opening. Hi George, why not treat yourself to something from our new spring summer collection? And now if I just scroll down, so these here are the 4 aspirational shots, which have been dynamically selected by the PHP script based on that propensity index. So we know that George Bailey had an aspirational value of SKU banding 2. So those, for an adult, those are items between £100 and £139.99. So here we can see some aspirational product. So we've got the Boss jacket, that's £130. We've got the men's shoes, that's £110. We've got the Blaze sunglasses, that's £139. So those have correctly been selected because they are at SKU banding 2, which is one banding sort of below what or what was the best value banding that he had actually purchased from in the 90 days, which was at 3. We've also got here, we've got the boys hoodie at £45. Now, the account holder had made 2 purchases of boys fashions during that last 90 days, and they were purchased at SKU banding 3. So again, he's been bumped up to a 2, and those are items between £40 and £69.99. So as you see, this has been correctly chosen by PHP at £45. So if we now go down to the next section, now what's happened really? We've got men's fashion, women's fashions, men's footwear, men's sportswear, boys fashion. So what it's actually done is it's based this selection of items only on the categories that the customer has bought from in the last 90 days. So George Bailey didn't buy any girls products, girls fashion, girls footwear, girls sportswear, girls accessory. He didn't get any of that, so they're not featured here. Similarly for women, there was only 1 purchase that George Bailey made in women's fashions, so we have included women's fashions, or PHP has included women's fashions. He purchased men's footwear, he purchased men's sportswear. We haven't included any of the junior categories either. So this has all been dynamically selected by PHP from that propensity index on the last 90 days. So if I go a little bit further, all of the men's fashions, they are based on the SKU banding, the best SKU banding of his purchases over that 90-day history, and those are then stored in the propensity index. So if I come back here into what we looked at a little bit earlier, so this is his exploded, or these are all the constituent elements of George Bailey's propensity index. So here, column D is he made 3 purchases from menswear. And they were here. They were the best SKU banding he purchased out of menswear, men's fashions, was at SKU banding 3. So consequently, if I go back to the email, all of these are also sitting within the price range of SKU banding 3. So SKU banding 3 equates to £60 to £99.99. So all of these products sit within SKU banding 3. Similarly, let's just go down to women's fashions, and again let's go back to his propensity key. So women's fashions are over here. So there was 1 purchase of women's fashions, and again that was at a SKU banding of 3, which is between £60 and £99.99. And if we now take a look again at the Ezine, there you go. So all of these 4 products sit between those values. They all sit within SKU banding 3. If we take a look at the men's footwear, so George Bailey purchased, now his footwear is back here, so he made 1 purchase, and that was at SKU banding 4. So SKU banding 4 is from £30 to £59.99. And if we go and have a look, here we go. All of these prices, all of these products, they sit within that SKU banding 4, 55, 59, 30, 35. Okay. For the sportswear, okay, so sportswear is here. So he made 3 purchases on sportswear during that 90 days, and that was actually quite a high spend. I mean, his best banding, SKU banding, was 1, which is top tier, and 1 is from £140 plus, and there's no upper limit. So if we look at here what's been selected for him on sportswear, all top tier kit. So £145, 140, 149, 150. And then the last category he spent in during the last 90 days was boys fashion. And let's just go back here, and boys fashions is down here. So there were 2 purchases, and his best SKU band-in for those purchases was 3. So for children, band-in 3 equates to between £20 and £39.99. And if we have a look here, yep, so we've got £29, 27, 21 and 26. So the PHP has correctly, as intended, has selected all of these products from the propensity index. Obviously, the other thing that we want to do with all of these shots is we want them to link back to the website. And each of these products, in theory, would have their own landing pages. It would take you specifically to those product pages. How do we do that? Well, if I just come down here and hover over boss, and actually if you look down here, when I hover, you'll be able to see the address it's pointing to, it's targeting. So it's targeting www Tim's Online Store. It's just a made up address for now. I mean, I'm not actually going to create these pages because that isn't the intention of the exercise, but it's going to plink.php, and then I'm actually carrying a variable in that URL called UID equals ASP underscore men underscore 2 underscore 0. So that is also the name of the actual JPEG. If I just go back and find the aspirational shots here. We go into HDoc. Here we go. Here we are. So the Hugo Boss is men underscore 2 underscore 0 dot jpg. And if I go back into the Ezine and again look at that, yeah, we got men underscore 2 underscore 0 is part of that variable that we are going to be passing to the page, to the landing page for this particular product. Each of these shots, they all have links specifically related to this to their own particular product. So here we've got a different one here. We've got men underscore 2 underscore 1, and if I go back into here, yeah, so the shoes men underscore 2 underscore 1, and this is the case for every single image that we have in this email. They've all got these links with unique variables attached to them. So this one here, the French connection dress, that's attaching a UID equals W underscore F underscore 3 underscore 2, and that relates again to the JPG image name. And these will go to a landing page that will then direct them on correctly to that correct content. In this case, it would be a French connection dress. Okay, so how did we actually get to do this? Okay, so let's take a closer look at how we're dynamically using PHP those images and links in the Ezine. So here we've got men's fashion from George Bailey's propensity index. So he had 3 sales in men's fashion. His best SKU banding was 3. Now, in terms of the images, the image names are key to how this is actually going to work. So the 4 men's fashion images which relate in this instance to how they're dynamically chosen are m3 underscore 1 dot jpg right through, as you can see, to m3 underscore 4 dot jpg. So the m3 signifies that this is for SKU banding 3. So these images relate to SKU banding 3 for men's fashions. Now, similarly, if we look at men's footwear for George Bailey in the last 90 days, we know he had 1 sale in men's footwear. SKU banding for that sale was 4. So similarly, the relevant images which are going to be picked up dynamically by PHP are m4_1.jpg right through to m4_4.jpg. And again, the important part here is the m4, which relate specifically to SKU banding 4. Now, in total, we've got 6 SKU bandings, or 6 possible SKU bandings, which equals 24 images per category. And by category, so I'm talking men's fashion, men's footwear, men's sportswear, men's accessories, women's fashions, women's footwear, right through children's clothes, girls, boys and juniors. So there is a total there of 24 images per category. So that's for the whole 20 categories. That's 480 images will be needed for PHP to be able to take your propensity index and actually dynamically select which images should be displayed in your Ezine. Aspirational images, the 4 aspirational images are in excess of this. They're actually on top of the 480 images that you would need just for general category product shots and links. So let's now go back into the code, and I'm going to try and explain to you how we're actually going to achieve this, or how we have achieved this. Okay, so now let's start talking about how those category products and links that we've seen featured in the Ezine are generated. Let's start with men's fashions, and I'm just going to quickly go back to the Ezine. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so these here are the 4 product shots that we're talking about, the 4 product selections. Now, how have we dynamically selected them? Bearing in mind, I've just shown you the overall process on the previous slides, and this is how that is then transferred and actually done in the PHP. So here we've got men's fashion NL variable, and it contains all of this HTML code. So this contains the coding, the HTML coding for each of those 4 images and the links. So if I just come across, I'm just going to quickly show you how we're doing this. So here we've got the first image out of the 4. Let me just highlight this. Okay. So here we've got the pathway for the image, which is http://www.techvirtuosity.com/media/men's-fashions/m and then we've got prop keys 4. Now if we go back into George Bailey's propensity index, we know that prop key 4 is going to be, there you are, that's 4. So this is, if you remember, so this is the best performing SKU banding for men's fashions, which equates to a 3. So that's how we know that in the code here it's actually selecting 3_1.jpg. Yeah. Similarly, if we now come across for the next image, it's doing exactly the same again. It's prop keys 4, which was the 3_2.jpg. And we're going to come across, we're going to do the same for the third image. Again, prop keys 4 underscore 3 dot jpg. And on the last image, that again is prop keys 4 underscore 4 dot jpg. So those are the names of the 4 jpg files that I showed you earlier for SKU Banding 3 in men's fashions, and that's how it's been dynamically chosen. Now if it were the case that prop keys 4, which is the SKU bandings, the best SKU banding for fashions, for men's fashions in the propensity index, was something else, let's say that it was a 2, it would correctly change that to prop keys 4 would be equal to 2 underscore 4 dot jpg. So it would dynamically change the name of the path of that image jpg. Now the other thing, similarly, obviously all of these images have also got a click-through. So each of these images, and I'll just show you this one example here. So here is the href, and it uses exactly the same technique in order to get that variable which I showed you a little bit earlier. Do you remember I showed you that there was a variable attached to the URL for each of those click-throughs, and here it is. So we've got plink.php question mark, which signifies that we're about to attach a variable to that URL, UID equals m prop keys 4, which in this case is 3, is all equal to 3, underscore 4. And that's how we attach that variable dynamically to the corresponding image. So we do the same on all of the sections. So that is the section for men's fashions. Then we've got a section again here. We've got a variable men's footwear, which does exactly the same thing. We've got the same for men's sportswear and so forth, and we will have this for every possible category. So we'll go right through the men's categories, right through the women's categories, right through the juniors, right through the boys, and right through the girls. And obviously there would be 4 variables per category for fashion, footwear, sportswear and accessories. So that's how we're dynamically driving that content. Now the other thing that you will have noticed from here, I think we've touched on this previously, is that the only categories that are appearing are those categories where a purchase was made. So there was a purchase of men's fashion, there was a purchase of women's fashion, there was a purchase of men's footwear, men's sportswear and boys fashions for George Bailey. So if we go back to the code in, what we can see is, if I scroll down, here we go. Okay, so now in order to select which of those HTML sections are going to actually appear in the Ezine, we do a series of if statements. So if prop keys 5, which is men's footwear, equals 0, as in there were no sales, then men's footwear NL equals nothing. We're actually would replace the variable up here, men's footwear NL, which was this section, and we would replace that with nothing. So that variable would no longer have any content. Similarly, we will go through all of them. So then if prop key 7, which is sales for men's sportswear, equals 0, as in there were no sales, again it would clear down men's accessories NL to nothing. It would empty out that variable also. So if we come up here, so there's the men's sportswear NL variable containing that chunk of HTML that shows all of those product shots and links. So if there weren't any purchases there, it clears that variable down to nothing. It empties that all of the content. And we go right through every single category doing that. And And then when we come down here and we talk about what are the variables that we're going to include in that newsletter, you can see that we are going through men's footwear, men's sportswear, men's accessory, women's footwear, and so forth, right through all of those categories. Now, if those categories had 0 in the propensity index, obviously those variables would have just been cleared down to 0. So in fact, there's nothing to display there because the variable is empty. So there's nothing to display in the Ezine. But if there were sales in that propensity index for a category, it would not have deleted the contents. So those HTML, the HTML coding containing all of the product shots and the product links would still exist. So only they actually appear in the Ezine. So in the case of George Bailey, we have men's fashions, yep, there was a sale, so that appears. Women's fashions, yep, there was a sales, so that appears. The same for men's footwear, men's sportswear, and boys' fashions. But for all of the other categories, as in, for example, all of these junior categories, all of these would have been reduced to empty, all of these variables, because there were no sales reflected in that propensity index for these. So that's how we control, or that's how PHP is controlling what sections are going to appear in that Ezine, and to make sure that it's relevant to that particular account holder, George Bailey. One of the things I do want to touch on, because obviously the primary audience for this retail sales Ezine is going to be the account holder, and that's going to be a man, or it's going to be a woman, it's not going to be a child. So one of the things that we definitely want to happen is, regardless of what your sales history is over the last 90 days, regardless of whether you actually bought any men's fashion or any women's fashion, those two are mandatory sections in the news Ezine. They are always going to appear regardless of whether or not they're actually in there for sales in your propensity index. So if I just scroll up, okay, so this is the little bit of code in here that is dealing with that. So we're going to go through if gender equals male, lead fashion NL equals men's fashion NL followed by women's fashion NL, else if gender equals female, lead fashion NL equals women's fashion NL followed by men's fashion NL. And those two variables will never be cleared down as part of these if statements. You'll see they don't even exist here as if statements. You know, we actually start off here with men's footwear, men's sportswear, men's accessories, and women's footwear, women's sportswear, and women's accessories, because they are mandatory categories and they will always be reflected in the Ezine. And the order at which they will always be reflected is dependent upon the gender of the Ezine recipient. So in this case, it's George Bailey, so it leads with the men's fashions followed by the women's fashions. Okay, let's now talk about the aspirational customization. We know that we've got 4 aspirational placeholders for 4 images and the corresponding links. And let's see how we're actually going to do that. So there are, for each of the overriding categories, so that's being men's, women's, junior, boys and girls, and don't forget each of those have 4 subcategories. So you'll have your men's fashions, your men's footwear, your men's sportswear, your men's accessories, etc. So for each of these overriding categories, I've set up a variable. So here we've got, for example, men's quantity, which is the total of all men's category sales. So that's all of the sales of men's fashions, men's footwear, men's sportswear, men's accessories make up men's quantity. Similarly, the same thing happens for women's quantity, the same for junior quantity, boys quantity, and girls quantity. The other variable that we then have is total quantity, which equates to all category sales. Yeah, so that's everything in men's quantity, women's quantity, junior, boys and girls, and that gives us those 6 variables. Okay, so now if we look at George Bailey, account number 45112309, to get to that total quantity, you can see here, during that 90-day period, there were 3 sales in men's fashions, there was 1 sales in men's footwear, and there were another 3 sales in men's sportswear. So the total of $men's QTY, that variable, is going to be 7. Then we know there were 2 sales in boys fashion, so boys quantity variable is going to be equal to 2, and we know that there was 1 sales in women's fashion, so there'll be 1, a total of 1 in women's quantity. Okay, so now we have another new variable, men's percentage, which is men's quantity, the men's quantity variable here, divided by the total quantity variable divided by 100. So that equates to 7 divided by 0.1, which equals 70. So that's 70%. Similarly, it makes the same calculation for another variable, boys percentage, which works out at 20%, and then the women's percentage for that 1 sales in women's fashion equates to 10%. Here you go. So this is how that 100% is made up: 70 to men's percentage, 20 to boys percentage, and 10 to women's percentage. So don't forget, there are 4 aspirational images and links at 25% each. So we now take another new variable, men's ASP shots, where we round up or down the men's percentage variable divided by 25. So that's 2.8, and that rounds it up to 3. Then for the women's aspirational shot is going to equal, again it does the same calculation, it's going to round women's percentage divided by 25, which equals 0.4. That actually rounds it down to 0. But for the boys aspiration shots variable, that's going to round boys percentage divided by 25. That's going to be 0.8, and that then rounds up to 1. So this is how we get to 3 aspirational shots for men's product and 1 aspirational shot for the boys products. Okay, so here we are in sendNewsletter.php. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to explain how we come up with the percentage. So for each overall category, so you've got the men's categories, the women's categories, the junior, the boys, and the girls. What we are doing is we are creating a quantity, a total quantity across all of their categories. So these, for example, are for the men's quantities, yeah, the overall men's quantities. And what that is doing, that is adding together prop keys 3, 5, 7, and 9. And if we go back into Excel, where we've exploded all of those separate elements, you can see that here 3 variable array 3 is equal to the quantity of men's fashions. Variable array number 5 is equating to the number of footwear sales. For 7, we've got sportswear sales, which is 3, and variable array position 9, we've got the number of sales in men's accessories. So if I now go back into the coding, those are the elements of the prop keys array that we're adding together to give us a total quantity of sales for the men's categories. We do the same for the women's. Again, counting up prop keys 11, 13, 15 and 17. We do the same for juniors, we do the same for boys, we do the same for girls. So we have now got a quantity of sales for all of those overarching categories. Then what we do, we calculate the total quantity of all sales made during that 90-day period. So we just added up men's quantities, women's quantities, junior quantities, boys quantities, girls quantities to give us that total quantity. Now the next thing that I want to do is talk about how we select and how we further calculate what images are going to be displayed for aspiration. So now we start talking about percentage. So we're going to have a men's percentage, a women's percentage, a junior percentage, a boys percentage and a girls percentage, and we work these out as follows. And let me just come over here. Okay, so we've got the men's quantity, which we took up here, where we added all of the fashion, footwear, sportswear and accessories together, divided by the total quantity, so that's the total quantity across all of those categories, divided by 100. And then we've got the women's percentage, it does the same for the women's quantity, the junior percentage, it does the same for the junior quantity, the boys percentage and the girls percentage, so forth. And then, as I showed you in those slides, we've then work out what the men's aspirational shots are going to be by rounding up or rounding down the men's percentage divided by 25. Don't forget, we've got 4 images, so that's 25% for each of those images. And then we do the same for the women's aspiration shots, the junior aspiration shots, the boys and the girls aspiration shots. And that's how we then decide how those aspirational shots are going to be selected. Okay, so you've now seen all of the key areas of the PHP code that drive the customization of that email. Obviously there's a lot more in the code that I'm not going to touch on because they're not part of this objective, they're not part of this project, such as, you know, how we actually use the PHP mailer to actually send that email. But this is all information that if you are interested in and if you want to learn more, there's plenty of other available videos and tutorials here on YouTube that you can look into. So we've now got to the situation where we have that first personalized Ezine, that retail sales Ezine. Now, as I said earlier, this is just the starting point. So we've reached that blank canvas, and from here we're actually going to move this project on and look at how we can take this idea of just a personalized email and actually start to develop a much deeper personal relationship with the customer. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.